Project Ascension by The Myth and Darthlink22. Chapter 3. Sorrow was the dominant emotion flowing through Rainbow Dash as she stood in the library with a fountain of tears flowing out her eyes. A part of her mind pleaded her to chase after those two DFS ponies and take Scootaloo away from them, but another part urged her to be responsible and help the filly out in the legal way. Though now her thoughts were misty, at least she could still hear the hateful words coming from Scootaloo, words that would forever leave a mark on Rainbow's heart. She looked at the floor, faintly hearing Twilight talking to Spike. Pinkie had left, been sent by the Pegasus to gather Scootaloo's things out of the cave so she could hold on to them. As she looked at the floorboards, she couldn't help but think of one question. Did I do the right thing? As she spoke those words, she felt a hoof encircling her neck and saw Twilight next to her. She leaned her head against the unicorn's shoulder, not caring if her image as a tough pony would be tarnished thanks to this. They were both certain as to what needed to be done, as they were also hurt by Scootaloo's departure. Twilight held on to her for a few moments before clearing her throat. Rainbow, we will get Scootaloo back. I promise you. Heck, I'll bet by the time they get to the Canterlot, Princess Celestia will have a royal Terralot waiting for us to take her back, with all the papers you need to sign. She looked up to Twilight's face with crestfallen eyes. You really think so, Twilight? Twilight nodded with a weak smile. Yes, we will. I had Spike send a letter to Princess Celestia not long ago. She will know what to do. Rainbow looked to Twilight's side and saw Spike standing next to his mother, as though he was in need of comfort and security too. Rainbow was surprised to see Spike's eyes radiating terror, something that she was not accustomed to. She let go of Twilight and moved to where Spike was standing. Spike, why do you look so scared? She asked the Drake, lowering her head to meet his eyes. Spike was uncertain how to answer her question. A part of him was concerned for Scootaloo, and the other part was beyond scared of those two ponies who took her away. He gulped slightly as his eyes wandered. I've got a bad feeling. Those two aren't what they seem. It's like they didn't even care about Scootaloo's welfare. Like they were zombies! And when they looked at me with those eyes, I felt so scared. He answered her weakly, trembling slightly with legs shaking. Twilight thought it best to hold him in her hooves until he calmed down, for it was a rare occurrence to see her boy petrified by any pony. Twilight sighed as she held on to Spike. We just need to wait for Celestia's reply. Only then will we know what to do exactly. Now, I suggest we all sit down and... The doors of the library burst open, and the door slammed hard against the wooden wall of the library, leaving an indentation. The ponies jumped slightly at this. Twilight and Rainbow held defensive positions until they saw who came in running. Twilight! We got trouble! It was Applejack, and she looked rather frazzled. What's wrong? Are the cows stampeding again? No, I saw these two big stallions in these fancy suits taking Scootaloo away! Most of the cow ponies surprised. The others looked relieved, maybe even a little annoyed. Relax. Those were just the two members of the Department of Full Services. It turns out that Scootaloo was a runaway. They were taking her back to Canterlot. Twat! They stomped that poor filly in the stomach. What? Rainbow asked flatly. Her eyes widened, her coat seemingly turning gray. She was hooting and hurling, so the pony carrying her dropped her down and stomped her stomach as hard as he could. Then they tied her muzzle shut and tossed her in the back of their carriage. I think one of them said something about killing her. What? Rainbow Dash shouted, and she flew up to the cow pony, gripping her shoulders. Where was this? At the west side of town, near our orchards. In a flash, Rainbow Dash was out the door, not waiting for any pony else. Rainbow, wait! These ponies said they were agents? Applejack asked. Twilight nodded, her mind racing 1,000 miles, trying to figure out what to do. They said Scootaloo ran away from her Canterlot orphans 2 years ago, so Rainbow Dash brought her here. She was bucking and screaming at going back, but we thought she was just throwing a tantrum. Go get the others, and get ready for an overnight trip. Spike, take a letter. We need to send the princess some information. Rainbow Dash was famous for her speed and agility, but with each flap of her wings, it felt as though time was purposely slowing down for her. Her inner voice started cursing herself for being fooled by two strangers and not believing the words of her #1 fan. In reality, she had always viewed her #1 fan as something more than a fan, even more than a friend. She reached her destination to find tracks leading to the exit of Ponyville, where she went to next. To her dismay, the tracks ceased, as though they were wiped away for any pursuers not to track. She started to hyperventilate, turning her head to every direction and flying to any random location. Rainbow could not find anything at all, and to make matters worse, it started raining. The very storm she had set up earlier today. She descended to the ground, and her breathing hastened, as the raindrops continued falling down to the soil she was standing on. Scootaloo, Rainbow Dash clenched her teeth as more tears were building up in her eyes. She started sniffing as her eyes were closing, her head bending down to the ground where she held herself. A myriad of memories flashed across her mind, all relating to Scootaloo, where it ended with Scootaloo pleading Rainbow not to let them take her away. Scootaloo! As she yelled out her name in anguish, she started sobbing as the more rain mixed with her tears. She heard faint voices coming toward her, but did not have the strength to look up to who was coming toward her. She felt herself being hoisted upwards by a pair of strong hooves, and briefly opened her eyes to see Applejack's concerned face looking at her. Applejack proceeded to place Rainbow on her back and secure her there as she started walking. "Come along, Circle Cube. You need to get out of here before you get sick. Don't worry, Rainbow. We're gonna get Scootaloo back, no matter what." Applejack assured her friend with a determined words that had more of a tone of sincerity to them. Rainbow opened her eyes slightly to see the darkened skies releasing the torrent of rain from the clouds that were floating above her. More images of Scootaloo came to her. Some of them were of a joyous pony, and some of them were of a depressed pony. As her eyelids were closing, she swore she could see Scootaloo smiling to her. "Scootaloo," she whispered to herself before exhaustion took over and sent her to the plains of dreams and nightmares. Oh, I feel like there should be a song cue right here. Twilight was always known to be a mare of action and planning, but even with this, she had no solid idea as to what to do next. She merely gave out orders that laid on the tip of her tongue as soon as she heard what the truth was. Though the reality was more complex for her to figure out, she had no idea who those ponies were, or even why Scootaloo was taken. Were they mass murderers looking for a target to slay? Full nappers looking for a ransom from them? Then a real shivers ran down her spine. Were they sexual offenders and wanted to take advantage of the poor filly? She honestly had no idea, and it was driving her insane. The only thing she could do right now was to come up with a plan on how to locate Scootaloo before any terrible fate could befall her. "Mom?" Twilight perked up, looking at Spike. "Yes, Spike?" "Princess Celestia said in reply," he explained, handing her a scroll with Celestia's seal on it. Not wasting a beat, Twilight levitated to her face. "My most faithful student, I'm afraid I have terrible news to report on your situation. As you had sent your second letter, I had just finished looking into your claim. No orphanage in the area has a file on Scootaloo, or any filly that matches the photo you have given me. After your second letter, I looked up the two agents. I found files on them in the criminal records. I sent you profiles on them, which should be attached to this message." Tearing her eyes off the letter, Twilight looked at the profile for the pony who had identified himself as Blue. As it turned out, Blue was the only name the royal court knew him by as well. Her eyes ran down his list of offenses, and she felt sick. Kidnapping, assault, sexual homicide, jaywalking. The very thought she had turned a filly over to the stallion made her sick. "I will send a few members of the royal guard to assist you in searching the area. Keep me informed when you learn more." Sighing, Twilight looked back to her son. "Have the others been told yet?" "Piggy came by with all of Scootaloo's stuff. Then he ran off to tell Fluttershy and Rarity. Applejack and Rainbow Dash aren't back yet. Rainbow Dash will probably tear Equestria apart before she'd be willing to come home." Well, I better get packed myself and do some research. Maybe there's a book on tracking." Scootaloo had felt the carriage stop. The doors opened, and Black came in. Moments later, she was hanging by his mouth again, being brought outside. She saw it. It looked like a ruined stone building, one of the several ruins found in the Everfree Forest. But it filled the little filly with fear. She wasn't in the forest. She knew that, but someplace farther away from Ponyville. She began crying heavily, trying to struggle, but she was tired and sore. Her sobs came muffled through the gag. She could barely see through her tears. She couldn't tell if they were inside or memorized the path Black carried her through. She didn't notice as he was carrying down a flight of steps into the underground areas that made up most of the building. She did, however, see the cage he was bringing her to. She gave a muffled shriek, renewing her thrashing, but it was in vain. The cage opened, and she was stuck in. She felt heavy metal cuffs clamp around her hind legs. Her restraint belt was removed. It was little comfort, however, because 2 more cuffs were secured around her forelegs. Finally, a thick metal collar clicked around her neck. Chains from all her binds connected her to the cage. Scootaloo continued to struggle free from this prison she was forced in, and yelled out with muffled screams and frustration to her fruitless efforts. The feisty one, aren't you? Subject 10. She felt herself freeze in the cage's door being opened, as she could see 3 figures walking up toward her, all of them looking at her with malicious glee. She immediately recognized the 2 earth ponies that took her away, Blue and Black. Blue was looking down at her like she was a mere ant in his presence, and Black had a wicked grin upon him, like he was about to pounce Scootaloo like a cat. The 3rd presence sent her into a petrified state, as she was beyond being scared of this pony. A Pegasus with a blood-red coat and blonde mane, perfectly styled. A cutie mark of a scalpel decorated his flank. He wore an expression that was hard for the filly to describe. He was looking at her with a sort of pride, though not the kind a parent would give their foal. More like the one would give a piece of art he had spent several hours perfecting. This was her jailer, the pony she had spent the last 2 years running from. Bloodwing. She appears to be in flying condition. He spoke to his 2 colleagues as he circled Scootaloo and inspected her body. So, I see she has a bruise on her stomach. Black lifted his head with his eyes closed. Yeah, that was me. She was being bucking annoying and being a downright bitch, so I shut her up. Bloodwing just stared at him blankly. Blue, punch him, he ordered him to do. Yes, sir. Wham! Black could not respond early enough, as a hoof collided with his muzzle, and he was sent flying against the wall, rubbing his muzzle profoundly to ease the pain numbing from it. Black, that hurt! What was that for, sir? Bloodwing ignored his cry of surprise as he continued staring at Scootaloo. You were ordered to bring her back alive, and a bruise to her stomach could have caused complications, you idiot! Getting back on his feet, Black just stared at his superior with annoyance, though as soon as Bloodwing's eyes met his, Black bowed him apologetically. My deepest apologies, sir. It won't happen again. Good. Bloodwing moved towards Scootaloo and decided to remove his muzzle from her mouth to let her breathe properly. He proceeded to stroke her cheeks as he let loose a small chuckle. Welcome home. Scootaloo just clenched her teeth in hatred, not having any word for this sick pony. You shouldn't feel so much hatred toward me. You should share some of that with the ponies who befriended you. Clear to me that you wouldn't care, he told her as he smiled wickedly at the helpless filly. He brought a hoof down to her chin and made her look into his eyes. Looking into those pupils, dead of any emotion, made her sick. You will bring me to the end of this, where perfection will be accomplished. My pretty. Scootaloo shivered, causing Bloodwing to chuckle. We have to look you over, my dear. Who knows what has happened since you have left us? The mad scientist went to a nearby table and picked up a syringe. Immediately, strength went back into Scootaloo's body, and she began thrashing against her bonds. Relax, dear. It is not your treatment. That comes later. You have a lot of treatments to catch up with. No, this is just a blood sample. The Pegasus wasn't calmed. Needles frightened her. She thrashed harder. Blue and Black reached into her cage and held her in place. The collar was removed, causing Scootaloo to start crying. Then she felt it, the needle entering her neck, piercing her skin. She cried. There was little pain, but she still cried. The needle was removed, and the collar was replaced. She barely resisted. She fell to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Now, see, that wasn't so bad, was it? Bloodwing cooed with a sliminess that took years of practice. "Now, stay here, like a good filly, while I run these tests. If you're good, I'll take the collar and shackles off." "Maybe." Rainbow Dash woke back up as Applejack sat her down at Twilight's table. A cup of hot tea was waiting for her. She reached for it and drank the contents slowly, instantly warming her throat and chest with the tea. She felt sick to the stomach, not because of any ailment or disease, but because of her actions she had performed earlier. More memories came back to her, and she shook her head and discussed what she had done. How she had not listened to Scootaloo. How she had betrayed the filly who had seen her as a hero, and now she was a villain in every way. Applejack looked upon her friend as somberly as she was berating herself for what had happened. She reached out a hoof to her friend and placed it gently on her shoulder. "Sugar Cube, y'all need to stop kicking yourself like this. You couldn't possibly have known that Scootaloo was—" Rainbow smacked her hoof away from her and glared at Applejack with tearing eyes. "No! It was my fault! I should have noticed something was wrong. I've never seen Scootaloo acting like that, ever. I should have done something. I should have..." She couldn't say another word, as she broke down crying. Applejack was shocked to see Rainbow in such a state. It was something she could not picture her friend to do. Applejack reached out and held her friend in a firm hug, which Rainbow submitted to and cried in Applejack's shoulders. Applejack patted her friend's back as she was shaking from the cold and tears that breached her eyes. "There, Rainbow. Lay it all out now. We'll find her." The door to the room opened slowly, and Twilight slowly entered it with 3 more teacups levitating in front of her. She passed 2 of them to her friends, as one stayed in front of her, and she sipped slowly, as her mind was in deep thought. "Rainbow, did Scootaloo tell you anything about who those ponies were?" Drying her eyes a bit, she told me he worked for a mad scientist. Bloodwing, I think. She said he was trying to make an alicorn." Applejack arched an eyebrow, while Twilight's eyes opened wide. "Some ponies trying to make an alicorn? I know, it sounds like a bad comic book, so I didn't believe her." Rainbow Dash started crying again. Twilight sighed. "I received a reply from the princess, telling me who those ponies were. And?" Twilight's face turned slightly grim before answering. "They are wanted criminals. Crimes involving kidnapping, assault, and possible murder. And jaywalking." As she finished the last word, she saw Rainbow's eyes burning with fury as she was a unicorn. She would have set herself on fire. "Now, I've been working on a spell to locate them. It should lead us to where those 2 have taken Scootaloo, but I suggest—" "We're going now!" Applejack and Twilight looked at Rainbow with a mix of confusion and worry. "Rainbow, it's 11 at night. There's no way we can go out and follow them right now. Besides, we need to get our rest, and you need yours too." Twilight tried to reason with her friend, but it proved to be no avail as Rainbow got off the table and tried to make her way to the exit of the library, but was stopped as a lavender aura surrounded her and kept her from moving any further. "I'm sorry, Rainbow, but I can't leave you leave this library until morning." Rainbow tried to move her limbs, but she couldn't move any muscle at all. "Twilight, let me go! I need to find Scootaloo. Listen, there's nothing we can do right now. The Royal Guards will be searching the area, and in the morning—" "No!" Rainbow wailed. "Every minute we're here, they could be hurting Scootaloo. Wait!" Twilight's horn glowed. It was like flicking a switch, and the Pegasus immediately dropped the lint. Carefully, Twilight levitated her onto Applejack's back. "Put her into my guest bed. You better tie her down. I don't want her flying off the moment she wakes up." "What are you going to be doing?" "I'm going to write to the princess and tell her about this Bloodwing pony. See what we can find out before tomorrow. Be ready to be out all day tomorrow. We're going to find Scootaloo." Scootaloo laid in her cage, her legs chafing from her binds. She almost wished she was back in the restraint belt. At least that was comfortable. She heard the doors open again, and she flinched. Bloodwing was back, with black and blue at his sides. "Good news, my dear. You're as healthy as ever. So that means we could continue your treatments." There was only a moment of silence before the chains rattled. Scootaloo scooted back to the end of the cage, hoping she would somehow pass through. The locks opened, and she was pulled forward. The collar came off, and the tears started again. Don't worry, this will only hurt a little, but the rest may be quite excruciating. He said the last word with a sick humor, as he pierced her skin with another syringe and injected her with a glowing purple liquid. She was squirming in fear as to what he was putting in her, but she could hardly move thanks to being held down by two other ponies. Once the syringe was removed from her skin, she felt immense pain all over her body, like her very blood was on fire. Her forehead felt like it was going to be split in two, and her wings felt like they were being stretched and pulled right off her body. The two ponies let her go and watched her squirm on the ground in severe agony. Black let out a gasp as he saw what was happening to her, and Blue's eyes slightly dilated at what he was seeing. "Sir, what exactly did you put into her?" Blue asked Bloodwing, who was merely smiling at the filly's struggle. Bloodwing shrugged and grinned. "Let's just say nature takes too slow. So, I was just speeding things up with her, that's all." Scootaloo felt another surge of pain in her wings, as though they were being ripped by a manticore. A stream of tears escaped her eyes, as she could not do anything to quell the pain in any way, and started shaking on the ground for what seemed like hours, but in reality was only a few minutes. Bloodwing snickered at this, and held a triumphant smile on his face. "This is going better than expected. Soon we will be able to move on to stage 3 of the project, my good followers." Black raised his eyes, and had a nervous expression on his face as he absorbed the information. "Sir, are you meaning you will be—" "Yes, and then we will be—" "Indeed." Black's nervous smile slowly turned into a grin of excitement, as he let out a mighty laugh, tearing at his senior's words. Blue was remaining stoic at these words, and just stared on at the filly before him, before stomping his hoof to get Black and Bloodwing's attention. "Sir, I think it is completed," he stated to his superior, pointing his hoof at Scootaloo's body, who was still unconscious and tear-stricken. Bloodwing moved forward, and lifted her head with his hoof to inspect it thoroughly, then proceeded to inspect Scootaloo's wings. He smiled even wider than before, and looked back at Blue. "Get me a mirror, please." "Yes, sir." Once Blue returned with a mirror in his mouth, Bloodwing took it and placed it in front of Scootaloo's face. "Look what we did for you, my pretty." Scootaloo looked into a mirror as best as he could. Her tears were hard to see through, and she couldn't notice any change right away. "It's your wings. They're just the right size for a pony your age. You're a little more complete. And look what else." She squinted. It was hard to see, then she noticed. It was a bump on her forehead. Not very big, but noticeable. "A horn! You're growing a horn. Your strength might have gone up too. The powers of all 3 races. Oh, you beautiful specimen, you." He stroked her hair. She cringed at the contact. "Just let me go," Scootaloo said, her voice ragged, tired from screaming all the last few hours. "I will do no such thing. I created you. You're my little pony. My wonderful creation. You belong to me. That's why you're all chained up. You need to learn your place, you naughty little filly." "I want to go home," she cried. "I want Rainbow Dash." "This is home," he said bluntly. "And Rainbow Dash doesn't want you. She gave you back to me, remember? Now, why don't you get some rest? Once you're rested up, we need to test these newfound abilities." "Such an adorable little filly." "You've come such a long, long way, and I've created you on that very first day, seeing you grow, to see how you might do, and to put all of you've been through, and all the ways you're going to make me proud of you. Now it's time for the new change to come. You are now grown, and your new life will begun. To see what you will go, to see what you will see, to find what I made you to be. It's time for you to fulfill your destiny. The collar was reapplied, the sickening click of it locking it, ringing in Scootaloo's ears. The cage was closed again, and the filly collapsed to the floor, crying. Host's steps sounded as Bloodwing and his lackeys walked away, leaving the filly with her tears. Rainbow Dash, please, help me!